Okay, we are live now. I'm making you host again, and you can make me a co-host then. It's done.
There you go.
Thank you. Have a good
I'll
session.
press record. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, Russ. Looking forward to it.
Hi, Sandra. Hi, Beverly. Hi, Carolyn. And we just have someone named iPad.
Hey, Russ.
Yes, Jane.
No, this is Carolyn. I wanted to ask you, I didn't get notes from this morning when you did your packing. You might not have. I was watching it, but it was a TV thing. You didn't sign up. And so I didn't know how you would know who was in the class.
If you put your email in the chat, you can just send it privately to me. I'll make sure you get them. They get sent to you because I have one other learner that wants to get them.
Okay, and also you had indicated in some of your sessions that you would send us your email, and I've never seen it.
It'll be in the class notes today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Carol. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, if anyone has missed class notes, you can contact me directly. And right now, I'll put my email in the chat, but still encourage you to put yours in. That way we'll be sure we have it. Make sure I get the correct email here. There you go. Russ the Guide at getsetup.io is you can contact me there. But also if you get yours in the chat to me, Carolyn, I'll make sure I'll get it sent over to you either later this evening or first thing tomorrow. Because I have another learner that wanted notes.
I put it in to you, but it won't send. So
Hit return, carriage return.
Oh, thank you.
Got it. There you go. There you go. And Melinda was the other person who wanted notes. So Melinda, you and Carolyn will both get notes later. And you're lucky because you asked me for the brand names of things that I had, and I forgot to add the brand names of the knapsacks and things. So I'll put those in the notes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I sent them another email address to send it to since the Comcast isn't working.
And they notified me. So, and I've now got your email. And what I'd really like to see, and I'll mention this to the folks that Get Set Up, was we start building a little place on our website where we have learner information that you can go to and you can click on things. Like if I put up a packing list, suggested 2-week packing list, you can click on that, or other resources. So a travel resources page. So I'm thinking about that. Don't have quite time to get to it right now.
I vote for that when you do.
Very good.
Russ, I think pretty much from here out, I'll be okay because I completely re-signed up with a new account in Gmail.
All right.
So I've been trying to switch over, but your classes fill up. So I had to attend on my old Comcast address.
Okay, good.
Hey, Melinda, here's the picture.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you. You're beautiful. Great smile.
Thanks.
So hi everyone. Hi Jutta and Cheryl Ann, Jane, Leslie, Beverly, Eileen, Joanne, Danya, Peggy, Joe, Sandra, and Barbara. Welcome this afternoon. Glad to have you here. And Leslie Ann is also asking for notes. I'll make sure you get those notes. I'll have probably be a little bit this evening before I get to the notes, but I'll try to get you the notes. And I'll just make a note of that right now to myself.
In my high school classroom, I always ask my students, how come you think I'm going to remember to do that? And they would say, because you put it in your brown book.
Well, I have my red book here, so
Okay,
I'm
go
still
for it.
old school. I have a journal, calendar, whatever you want to call it, date book. It's all there.
Me too.
It's because the digital world is sort of fuzzy to me. By that I mean, if I put it out there, it's just hanging out there. But the physical is easier for me to grab a hold of. So I live in both. I have a
You know,
I have a
Well,
digital calendar and everything's on there, and I live by it every day.
I've started, of course, I carry a journal as well, but the journal I keep daily has things like expenses and just brief things. But as far as thoughts journaling, I found that I use notes on my iPhone. And then that way I can just yak on in the evening as much as I want. And then as far as thoughts, and then later I can just take notes and transfer it into a Word format if I actually want to make a diary later. But that way they're on my phone, and notes is an easy, low memory thing to get to.
That's
So
right. You can dictate. I
haven't tried that, but
I first started. Oh yes, you can dictate. I first started with Get Set Up teaching classes and how to self-publish and do some writing, and I will be reviving those classes by the summer. They've kind of fallen off right now. But one of the things I tell people if they want to write is like if you're a lot of thoughts come to me while I'm walking. So I bring my phone, I open the notes, and you can dictate into the notes app. And then later you can cut and paste that and put that in a Word document or whatever you're writing in. So it's a handy way. I did it on a bike trip this last summer. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you all here this afternoon. And I'm going to do a screen share with you. And remind me, however, before I do that, remind me one thing when we're done with the presentation, and there'll be lots of chances for questions and answers. And I encourage you to put your questions in the chat, and I will definitely take note of them. I got a whole bunch of things to show you from my pilgrimage. I also have this from when I shared about walking the Camino de Santiago. So don't let me forget to show you those things at the end, because I've got the guidebook that I used, the certificate I got, the credential that you carry to get pilgrim stamps. All that is kind of fun stuff to look at. So welcome to the class. We have Nancy here as our TA, and she'll help you with any technical questions. She'll also scoop up questions that you type into the chat and make me aware of those. So I'm going to go ahead now and do a screen share, and you should see something that says the Way of St. Francis, the Via di Francesco, which is Italian.
Yes.
And I'm going to go ahead. We'll get started. I am Russ, your guide from Harrisonburg, Virginia. I'm a writer, a walker, and a cyclist, and I formerly was a book publisher, and my favorite thing as a publisher was help authors shape their ideas into a book. Now I'm a full-time guide with Get Set Up, and I love working with older learners, and I get a lot of energy out of it. So that's why I'm doing this. Get Set Up helps you learn useful things from people like you so you can do wonderful things. We learn from each other. Ideally, we can see you and your cameras are on, and you can request a recording of this class after the class. You can email help@getsetup.io. And if anyone's joining by live stream, the best way to participate is to join us and register for a class. And we already heard someone today talk about the advantages of registering for a class. Lastly, Get Set Up's not paid to promote any specific products. We are just an educational organization. In 2018, I walked 500 miles on the Camino Frances in Spain. That is the most walked modern Christian pilgrimage route in the world. Nearly 400,000 people walked it, or I should say arrived in Santiago in 2018, the year I walked it. Those 500 miles took me 5 weeks, and my wife joined me for the last stretch. She was there about the last week of walking, which was really nice. But I walked the first 4.5 weeks solo, meeting, of course, hundreds of other pilgrims and enjoying meeting lots of new people and experiencing that pilgrimage.
We're happy to see your wife. A picture
Yeah,
of your
yeah.
wife
Well,
finally.
I'm glad you think so. I like to see her too. The Way of St. Francis is a 300-mile or 500-kilometer path from Florence to Rome. Most pilgrims walk in the direction toward Rome, that's north to south, with Assisi as a destination in the midway. My wife and I decided to do it a bit differently and walk to Assisi from Rieti, which is a bit north of Rome. So we were walking south to north, which means we walked south to north, and we would do it over. We decided we would do the entire walk from Florence to Rome over several years. So we only had a little over 2 weeks to walk this time. We knew we couldn't walk all 300 miles in 2 weeks. We certainly didn't want to try. And so we said, well, we'll go back and do it again. Kind of different. When I walked the Camino de Santiago, I actually left my job and took a year off. And during that year, the first thing I did was, the second thing I did, I went to Colombia for 2 weeks to visit my son. Then I went to Spain for 6 weeks to walk the Camino de Santiago. It was something I had been dreaming of for about 20 years. During that time that I'd found out about had been dreaming about going in the Camino de Santiago, I found out about the Via di Francesco, and I got interested in going, especially to Assisi, because I thought of going there for a long time. I'm a big fan of St. Francis, if you could call his people who appreciate him fans. The route is marked with signs, yellow and blue blazes, and key symbols. So there's all sorts of different ways that route is marked. A key is the traditional symbol of pilgrimage to Rome, much like the scallop shell is the symbol of the Camino de Santiago. In the Middle Ages, people would bring home from Santiago a scallop shell to show that they'd been there. If they went to Rome on a pilgrimage, they would bring home a palm branch. And hence is the origin of the name Palmer. People that went to Rome were called Palmers. Now we have the surname in English, Palmer. Our plan, after we walked this in 2019, September of 2019, was to go back in 2020 and complete the journey. Obviously, that didn't happen. I don't even know when it's going to happen. I don't think we're going to complete it this year. So next year, that's okay with me. Just to give you an idea, here's a map that shows the route. So in Italy, this is Florence up here, kind of in north central Italy, and Rome is down here, just a bit of the south of the center of Italy. And we began this place called Rieti, which actually says that it is the geographic center of Italy, or of the boot. Now, what you're noticing here, this route is actually, you'll see many colors. That's because the route is actually many different trails that conjoin with one another. Whereas the Camino to Santiago is an ancient pilgrimage route that is probably 1,200 years old, on top of a Roman road that's another 600 years older than that, on top of an ancient Celtic route that's even older than that by we don't know how long. These are definitely ancient paths and routes. Let me get back to that. All of these on the map here. But there were a whole lot of routes. In Europe, they have lots of hiking trails, and they're marked routes with numbers. And so what the Via di Francesco does is it starts in Florence, and as it goes, it begins to join with these different routes. And so the route that I took is a route mapped out in a guidebook, and I'll show you this later. It's the one by my friend Sandy Brown. And that is the route that is red here. So it begins in Florence and it goes all the way down to Rome, and midway is Assisi. So we decided, well, we want to go north from Rieti to Assisi. We want Assisi to be our destination. And the reason I picked that section to walk is because it is less remote. The parts of it are very remote. Whereas if you're walking from Florence, there are some very beautiful but remote places. And I also, what I read and saw about all the mountaintop cities, cities and towns of Italy. This is the Umbrian Mountains. This is the Umbrian region right here in the Umbrian Mountains that you go through. Just look beautiful. I said, I want to go experience that. So that's how we chose to start in Rieti and go to Assisi. And of course, when we had our guidebook, the guidebook is taking us the other direction. So we had to, each day we looked at each stage, we kind of had to figure out in reverse how to get from one place to another. And we used this guidebook published by Cicerone Press, The Way of St. Francis. I'll show you more about that later. We carried packs weighing about 12 to 14 pounds. This is less than the Camino de Santiago because we needed fewer things. When you walked in the Camino, for example, we had to bring a lightweight sleeping bag or sleeping bag liner. We also had to bring a towel, a travel towel. We didn't need those things because we were going to stay in guest houses and hotels and inns the whole way along this route. There are some albergues and there are hostels and places you can stay. We chose not to stay any of those this time. We actually booked all of our lodging ahead of time, which I would not recommend. I recommend you just book your lodging one night ahead. So we didn't need to carry as much stuff. I did bring a laptop along because I was working on a book project and wasn't a good idea. I'll never do that again. Wasn't even that heavy of a laptop, a MacBook Air, but I wouldn't bring one again. We also hike with poles. We're big pole hikers. In other words, we like to trek with those poles. When you walk with poles, they take 30% of the pressure off your joints and they keep you from falling and stumbling. And that happens. We flew from Washington Dulles to Rome. And in Rome, the airport is not in the middle of the city. You have to take a train or a bus to get into the center of Rome. It's about 40 miles. And so we elected to take a bus from the airport, took a red-eye flight. And of course, when we're driving in, you get in the center of Rome and you see the Colosseum and the highway goes right by the Colosseum. And I'd seen pictures of this from my dad when I was a kid. And I thought, oh my gosh, there is the Colosseum. I'm in Rome. We took a train from Rome to Rieti, which is a charming small city about 40 miles north of Rome. And you can see from the rooftops, mountains above it. So you get this is quite a terrain we're getting ready to hike through. We started our pilgrimage from the cathedral in the center of Rieti. There's my wife with her gear. And of course, we always like to start with a picture of our feet at the place where our pilgrimage begins. The first day out, we walked toward the small town of Poggio Bostoni. We went through forested areas. Again, you can see the mountains in the background. The mountains are always around you in Umbria. This is the refuge of the forest, which is still a Franciscan retreat place. They actually have lodging. We were staying in Rieti, which is about 5 kilometers south of there. But this was established way back in the Middle Ages by early Franciscans and still run by the Franciscans. And the first day was through heavily wooded areas, beautiful gravel tracks, some asphalt roads. My wife and I like to buy some bread and some cheese and some fruit and stop and have a lunch. And we found this clever loaf in the bakery before we left Rieti, carried it along with us. This is one of the first charming hilltop towns that we crossed through. This is not Poggio Bostoni, our destination, but I'm going to have to pull the name of it out of my hat. I'll come up with that in a second. It begins with a C. Anyway, it's a beautiful place. And let's see if I can find it right here. Poggio Bostoni to Rieti. We went through Cantalice is the name of it, to get my map out here. This is between Rieti and Poggio Bostoni. And we came in from the south up here at the top of the town and then had to walk all the way down to the bottom. And that's it from a little bit of a distance. Normally people going north to south would walk the other way. They climb up through the town on the way out. As we approached Poggio Bostoni, we're having to go up quite an elevation. And so it was, even though it wasn't that far, we had to do a lot of climbing. There's my wife saying, I still got to climb up there. And she is right. We still had to climb all the way around to that. And then we had to climb all the way up through the town. You can see how steep the streets are here and narrow. I really don't know how these hilltop towns in Italy hang on. They're just built on the mountainside. And I guess as they needed more space, they just kept building down below or building up above. They're absolutely beautiful. This is Poggio Bostoni in this as the sun is starting to set. And again, you can see the mountains behind. We, of course, were going around the mountains that day. Nancy, is there a question? Let's see here. Let me check the chat here. Melinda says that you spend no time in Rome. We spent time in Rome at the end. We came back to Rome and we spent our first night in Rieti. Yes. So we took the train from Rome to Rieti. It's a couple hours. That's actually not that far. Woke up the next morning, look out the window of my room, down into the valley, the Rieti Valley that we had skirted along the edge of, and it was completely fogged in, but you can see the mountains ringing everywhere around. Very mountainous region. We decided that day not to go on to Piedaluca by foot. We had thought of it, but it was pretty remote and we were pretty tired after the first day. And so we took a longer day and we hiked up to a hermitage, which St. Francis had built above Poggio Bostoni. The hermitage was originally built in a cave, and now there is a chapel there. And so that's where we went that day. And then we came back down, caught a bus, and went part of the way to Piedaluca, which is a beautiful lake town, also very old, about 700-800 years old. And we spent the night there. Was a wonderful place to walk into. We stayed in a hotel with a pool. It was too cold to go swimming that day.
Russ,
Yes.
we have a few questions in chat.
Okay. Yes. The first day, and someone is asking if we could show you the map. I will show you the map again. Yes, I will. The first day's walk, thank you for asking, was about 20 kilometers or about 12 miles. And when I was in Spain walking the Camino de Santiago, I averaged walking 25 kilometers or 15 miles a day. But anyone who's walked the Camino de Santiago knows that a lot of it's flat or not that hilly. That's not true on the Via di Francesco. There's a lot of ups and downs. I think we only had maybe one day where there wasn't too much climbing. And so that's why it's a lot more tiring. Many people who have walked the Camino ask, hey, is walking the Via di Francesco the same way? And I say, no, it's not. It's a lot more rigorous. So for us, that 20 kilometers was good. And that was about our average for the 8 days of walking we did, was about 20 kilometers. We did about 100 miles.
Did you have places set up already before you left? And so what happens when you decide not to walk as far the next day? Or
we did prepare all of our lodging ahead of time, which I would not do again. And that is why we took a bus to Piedaluca. We had our reservation the next night. We didn't take the bus the whole way there. We walked part of the way, but it was the reason we didn't walk. This is looking south toward Poggio Bostoni, where we had started that morning. And this is the village on the way to Poggio Bostoni. There's a very remote section of forest, and we weren't actually sure where we were going to get food after breakfast in that morning in Poggio Bostoni to walk all the way to this village and then on to Piedaluca. And we were pretty tired. So we said, you know what? This is a pilgrimage. We're still going to get there. We can take the bus part of the way to Piedaluca. I'm really glad we did that.
Okay, there is one question.
Yes, another question. Let me see if I can get the chat to pull down here. Yes, how would you lodge as you go if you didn't go ahead? A good question. In Italy, it's taking me a little too far back. There we go. In Italy, along this way, one could simply phone or email the day ahead, or maybe 2 days ahead at most for lodging. That's more customary. When you walk in the Camino de Santiago, you just arrive in a village at an albergue and get your lodging that day. That's what they're used to. Pilgrims generally do not need to make reservations. If you're going to a hotel along the Camino de Santiago, you might want to make reservations. We could have done it by just contacting them the day ahead. We made all of our arrangements on booking.com actually, which worked very well in Italy. Our first day out, then when we left Piediluco, we walked about 25 kilometers. This was one of our 2 longest days to the town of Macanone, really tall, small town with a single hotel and restaurant going up through a river valley. So it was pretty flat. But we met the first hour out an American coming the other direction. So we stopped and chatted with her. I believe she was from Texas. And this was a very common thing for us along the way, to stop and chat with people, because we were walking south to north and those people were walking north to south. So we often encountered pilgrims going that direction. My wife, by the way, has a Deuter pack. She likes Deuter. I'm an Osprey guy. It's all about the fit. As we walked up through the river valley that day, we passed more hillside towns. This is Aroni. And there's just one of these beautiful little towns after another. That's how the Italians sort of defended themselves, by building originally their hilltop towns. And some of them are built on top of high bluffs. Some of them even have castles above them. Now, as we were walking our second day, again, 25 miles to Macanone, we encountered these 2 older women coming the other direction. And we stopped for a minute and said hello and asked them where they were from. And they said they were from Germany. And I asked them, how much their packs were weighing. And the woman on the left here said her pack was about 10 or 11 kilos, which is about 21, 22 pounds. And the woman in the middle said, mine's about 11 to 12 kilos. So that means it was 23, 24 pounds. And then they said, guess how old we are? And the woman on the left, the younger one, was 76. And the one in the middle, the older one, was 80. And they go out and do these walks all the time. So I always show this picture to people who think that they're too old to go walking. I'm saying, you should see these 2 older women from Germany that I met along the way.
Yeah, but I bet they didn't start walking at that age.
Well, they may not have. They may not have, but you'd be surprised what you can still do. We continued along. The second day was fabulous walking, a fairly flat, nice dirt/gravel road all the way. No traffic, no cars along here, but still quite hilly and mountainous. We passed through a lot of vineyards. And it was because it was late September coming into October. They were getting ready for the grape harvest. And the other thing that we saw even more of than vineyards in this part of Italy, which is in Umbria, so it's more in the mountainous area, were olive orchards. Everywhere olive orchards. And that's what the olives look like. And you actually have to get up close to the tree and look, because the olives are still green. They weren't ready for harvesting yet. You couldn't see them unless you got way up close and looked at them. Continue to walk. This is a beautiful river valley from Piediluco to Macanone. And you pass castles on the mountainsides, lots of gardens with tomatoes. I enjoyed the way that the Italians staked up their tomatoes with these teepees. And then the next day, after staying the night at Macanone, we did have to head over a mountain pass. Now, this was the most rigorous day of all. It was about 23 or 24 kilometers. So I wasn't sure how well we were going to do it, because we had to get up over the mountains and then down to an old monastery and finish up the day in Spoleto. Now, Spoleto is a kind of a historic Italian city. And as we were leaving Macanone, there aren't a lot of Macanona, sorry, there aren't a lot of places to stop and stay. There's a little like campsite about 5-6 kilometers out of Macanona that we could stop at. But otherwise the next stop was going to be Monteluco, which is this monastery on the other side of the mountains, and it was about probably 10 to 15 kilometers. Well, you can see it's a beautiful walk up over the mountains, but it was quite a hike. And of course, we had to head up over the pass along in here. And we weren't going to actually climb the top of the mountains, but go through a pass. And Well, you can see how rocky it was and a lot of climbing, and we didn't bring enough water with us. And we had thought there would be other places along the way to stop, and our map wasn't that good. And so we weren't finding villages where there were water. And I was trying to think, I don't know how we're going to get over this mountain without water. And again, you can see how rugged it is along the edge of the hillsides. Well, right in the point where we had to do the last big climb over the mountains, which was going to be about 6 or 7 kilometers, we ran into 2 women. They were both from the States, a mother and her daughter, hiking the Via di Francesco together. And they were coming down over the mountain. And so they only had about 4 or 5 kilometers to go, or maybe a little over an hour of walking, and they would be done. We asked them by chance if they had any water, and they said, you know what, we've got these camelbacks on here that have got about 5 or 6 liters of water, and we don't need all that water. Well, were we glad. We got out our empty water bottles and completely filled them to the top after taking a nice big drink. So we're glad to meet these 2 angels who saved us with their water. And when you're doing pilgrimages like this kind of thing happens. And so a lot of this sort of thing happens when you're in the Camino de Santiago, but I can say it also happens when you're in the Via di Francesco. We arrived in Spoleto, which is a historic town. It's also a cultural center with art festivals and music festivals. And we decided in advance that we would spend an extra day in Spoleto. And we were glad we did, because when we'd come over the mountain after we'd met the 2 women with the water, it still took us another 3 or 4 hours to get up over to Monteluco, the monastery we were going to. When we got to Monteluco, we found out that the old viaduct across the valley into Spoleto was closed, which meant we were going to have to do several kilometers extra walking around to get into Spoleto. And it was getting late afternoon. It was about 4:30, and we knew that we had about 2 to 2.5 hours of daylight left. And we weren't quite sure how long we were going to still need to walk these last kilometers into Spoleto. So we asked there if there was a bus, and they said yes, there was a bus coming at 6, so we would have to wait about an hour and a half. Meanwhile, an Italian couple in their 30s was walking around sightseeing and found out that we were trying to get into Spoleto and came up and offered us a ride. So we got a ride the last 6-7 kilometers into Spoleto from Monteluco, and that's where we got a guest apartment and spent a day. And Spoleto was a fabulous city, and we really enjoyed ourselves while we were there. This is the viaduct, which we had intended to walk across, so that we would have come down from Monteluco and across this viaduct right into the heart of Spoleto. And instead, we would have had to come down and then walk several kilometers southeast going this direction. It was damaged in an earthquake. They're not sure that it's safe for people to walk across. The first morning coming out of our guest apartment, I must have had something on that said Camino de Santiago. I'm not sure what it was, but this woman suddenly said to us, "Oh, the Camino de Santiago." This is an Italian family. "We'd love to walk the Camino de Santiago." And they stopped and posed for a picture for us. We just found the Italian people delightful. Coming the other direction from Florence, heading south, as I mentioned, most of the pilgrims were going the other way, was this woman on the left and her aunt that she was walking with. And I had gotten in touch with them through a Facebook group. There is a Facebook group for walking the way of St. Francis. And I had joined the group and said, we're going to be leaving on a certain date. and this young woman said, "Well, my aunt and I are walking. We're coming the other direction. Let's see if we can meet along the way." And as we kind of looked at our itineraries as we were walking, we said, we're both going to be in Spoleto tomorrow night. So we met and had a nice, wonderful time, a splendid meal in Spoleto together. And this is one of the things I like about finding, being part of a social media group on something like Facebook, where there are other travelers and you can find out who's traveling in the area when you're going to be there. And so it was really nice to compare notes about the walk. And we've been in touch since then. I always loved in Italy stopping mid-morning for a pastry and a cappuccino. When you're in Spain, it's the cafe con leche. In Italy, it is the cappuccino, which of course we have in America. Love to stop and take a break mid-morning for something. After we left to Spoleto, we walked about another 20 kilometers to the hill town of Trevi. And again, one hill town after another. I really enjoyed Trevi. This is the central square up on the top of the hill in the center of the town. touristy, sure, but less touristy than some of the other places around. And we happened to arrive there on a Sunday, and after supper, went walking around up a little bit higher up, and we found a bigger plaza. And it seemed like the entire town was up in the plaza that night, either in restaurants and cafes, or there were about 150 children playing in a playground nearby. So it was a delightful late summer evening in late September, and everybody was out in Trevi. The next day, we walked yet about another 20 kilometers to the town of Spello. And on the way, met a group of pilgrims. They were all Italian, walking with their dogs in the city of Foligno, and stopped to get a picture with them. I always like to see people walking on a pilgrimage with their dogs. My cat wouldn't do it. All along the way, you do see small churches, chapels, and shrines because it is a pilgrimage area. People are heading toward Assisi, and this is just a very typical one that we would see along the way. But more often, we see small shrines like this by the side of the road for pilgrims. Same thing you see on the Camino de Santiago. Then we approached Spello. Now, Spello is quite a town. It was a town settled by the Romans. It was older than the Romans, but the Romans made it a bigger town. And this is the Roman gate right here from the 2nd century. Spello is known for its flower festival that it has every year, in which artists come and create beautiful works of art out of flower petals on the street. That happens during the summer. We weren't there when that happened. But consequently, Spello was known as a city of flowers. In fact, my wife and I said Spello was almost too beautiful. There are just flowers and beautiful artwork everywhere. So we really enjoyed Spello. Here we are looking back south toward Trevi and Spoleto. Beautiful valley. The next day, we walked about another 15 kilometers then to Assisi. We took there are 2 routes that go from Spello to Assisi. One goes up along the mountains to an old hermitage that the Franciscans had. The other route goes through the valley. We took the lower route through the valley and found our way finally around noon to Assisi. And that's our picture of us at the gates of Assisi. And then we had a guest apartment for 3 nights in Assisi because we really wanted to spend time there. Assisi is a fairly sizable town, about 30,000 people, and it's pretty big. We were staying at the top of the town up near one of the old castles, and the Basilica of St. Francis is clear at the other end of the town, about a mile away. There's our feet. For anyone who's interested in foot gear, we generally walk in sandals in warm weather. Those are Chacos. My wife had taken hers off. I'm not sure why that day, but I like to walk in Chacos. I have feet that are almost completely flat. And the straps leave tan marks on your feet. My feet are almost completely flat, and Chacos have 3 arch supports, and they are the most comfortable thing I can think of to walk in. The straps are adjustable, and you can wear some socks with them. So if it's a little bit cooler out, or even if it's raining, you can walk with socks. Just change your socks partway through and put on something dry. Assisi is a beautiful town, yet another mountaintop town. And that is the Church of St. Clare down here. And that is the Basilica of St. Francis, clear at the north edge of the town. And after arriving there, we went and got stamps in our pilgrim credentials. I'll show you that later. And also got a certificate, show you that too. And then went to a Pilgrim Mass. It was all in Italian, but I know enough Latin, and my wife is, of course, Catholic. We used to be Catholic, so that we could figure out where in the liturgy we were when we were in the Pilgrim Mass that night. And I'll make sure I get you the name of my Chaco sandals. Yes, they are the most comfortable things, and very rugged for trekking. We spent several days in Assisi walking around the town. We had a delightful guest house up on the edge of the city, actually just outside the old city walls. And I always like to have coffee out on a patio or deck in the morning. There was a little porch out behind the apartment we stayed in. Enjoyed several meals. This is some lentil soup that's big everywhere in Europe, and no less in Italy. This is the Rocca, or the castle above Rocca Maggiore, big castle, major castle above Assisi. We walked up to the castle, but didn't take a tour through it. Down below Assisi is the church that St. Francis started renovating or rebuilding back in the early 13th century, when he felt he had a call from God to do that. And this is the church. Eventually, he gave this to St. Clare and her sisters. And we went down there. It's about a kilometer below Assisi, maybe not even quite that far yet, but it's quite a ways down. We went down there one afternoon and found it very beautiful and not very touristy. We found a quieter, more sacred spot. We really enjoyed it. After spending 2 days in Assisi, we were getting ready to leave, but it was coincidentally the Feast of St. Francis, October 3rd, when we headed out. And so there was a big parade. There was a big parade the night before with lots of drumming and singing and trumpets. And the next day there was a procession. Representatives from all the villages and towns in the region around there came and walked on the procession through Assisi. So we sat and watched that for a while. Before we left to go home, and our first stop would be a few days in Rome, we went down to the train station, which is not right in Assisi, but it is about 2 kilometers below the city, down in the valley. And there's a famous church down there. This is called the Portiuncula, or Little Portion. And this was a small chapel or church given to St. Francis and his brothers way back in the early 13th century. And it became their home. It's also where St. Francis died. He is buried up in the Basilica of St. Francis. And as this happens in the Catholic world, they built an enormous basilica over the church. Just a little chapel when you walk inside there. Then we went and we spent 3 days in Rome. Those are the Spanish Steps, if you've ever been there. Rome in October was packed with tourists and from all over the world. I took this picture because this is a spot where my father had taken a photo back in about 1965. There's another whole story I'll have to tell someday in a class of how I sleuthed out where my dad had taken photos in Rome. A few of them, like this, were famous places, the Spanish Steps. Some of the other spots, I couldn't figure out what they were. And I mostly used Google Maps and then you can zoom into street level to find out where my dad had taken pictures. And while we were in Rome, we went to most of those spots and took a picture just for fun. Our last afternoon in Rome, we sniffed out a local market. That's one of the things we love to do in any city or town, not just a tourist place, but a local market with a local shop. And we found one about a kilometer away from the center of town and went there and enjoyed walking the market and buying a few things to bring home. We brought home lots of bags of spices for our children. And we had an early morning flight the next day out of the airport in Rome. So we took a train out to a hotel right by the airport that had a shuttle to the airport the next day. So that way we could get a good night's sleep and then catch a shuttle the next morning after breakfast and take us to the airport. And so that was the last time I've been on an airplane, October of 2019. Let me stop the share and let me see what kind of questions we have here in the chat. And I will invite you to ask some more questions. Let's see. Yes, I will include the names of the sandals, Chacos. The cost of the trip from round flight, lodging, food, etc. That is a good question because when you're on the Camino de Santiago, you can reckon on doing it for about $40 a day. That's lodging, food, and everything. You can even do a little bit less than that. I would say for us, the cost was more like $100 a day. Now we were sharing a room together, staying in the guest houses and apartments as a couple. So it was a little bit less expensive that way per person, but still I would say it's about $100 a day. Transportation was very easy. You can get around Italy very well by train, which is what we did. And we got around Rome by bus. The Rome bus system is somewhat perplexing. We were there for a full day before we figured out how you were supposed to pay for the bus. and you're supposed to go into a tobacconist and get a ticket, but there was nobody checking tickets. We didn't take the bus a lot, but we took it one day and we were all tired at the end and wanted to get home. Let's see. Well, let me just stop here and ask about questions. And I know someone asked how far we walked. Our total walking distance was 160 kilometers, which is about 100 miles. And we did that over 7 to 8 days of walking. The entire route is 300 miles. Our plan is someday, was supposed to be last year, probably not going to be this year, maybe next year, is to go back and start in Florence and walk from Florence to Assisi, which is about 150 miles. Take 2 weeks to do that. And then another time, go back and start in Assisi and jump ahead. I would like to walk at least a stretch from Assisi to Spello through the mountains, and then skip ahead back to Rieti and walk from Rieti into Rome. That way we'll have walked the entire distance. And I plan to write a book about it. I wrote a book about walking the Camino de Santiago back in 2018. It's called The Walk of a Lifetime. And I self-published this in 2019, sold very well. And so my plan was to write a second book about walking the way of St. Francis. A couple things I'll show you here, and then I'll also field any more questions. This is the book by Sandy Brown, which is The Way of St. Francis, a very good guidebook. If anyone knows on the Camino de Santiago, the thing you carry is a scallop shell. On the Way of St. Francis, it's a tau cross. That's sort of the symbol of St. Francis and Assisi. And I did receive a certificate for, I think it was free, in the Basilica of St. Francis for having walked at least 100 kilometers. And along the way, we also, like on the Camino de Santiago, where you have a pilgrim credential, we got a credenziale and we carried it with us, and we got stamps every day. And that way a person in the cathedral in Assisi could see that we had indeed walked that whole distance. So that was kind of fun to collect it and get stamps. If anyone knows a person who's walked the Camino de Santiago, you have a big credential full of, dozens and dozens and dozens of stamps.
Well, we missed each other. I was over in Rome in 2019, October also, but not the same dates.
Okay, yeah. It was very warm and beautiful. I happened to be in Rome in a day when you could walk through the Forum for free, which also meant a lot of other people were doing it. But we went through there and toward the end of the afternoon when there weren't as many people. And we also found out that there are about 3 or 4 ways to get into the Forum. And we found the gate that had the least number of people going in. So we got in within about 5 minutes. Gloria says, don't forget a map. The guidebook has a map in it. So that's a really good way. Also, we have on our phones, you can get what they call a GPX track, or that shows the route. And so we used our phones also to locate where we were. Because we were walking the opposite direction from the guidebook, every now and then we weren't quite sure where we were. So that's when we had to pull out our phones and see where we were. Curious thing, my phone never had us in the right place, but my wife's phone always had us in the right place.
Did you happen to know about the Feast of St. Francis before you all went over there to know that you'd be there for it?
We did. And that was why one of the reasons we made our lodging was because I realized it was the Feast of St. Francis. So we made our lodging because we knew it would fill up right away. And so we kind of backdated our lodging all the way. If I did it again, I wouldn't do it that way. But it was okay. We stayed in wonderful places, and I definitely have the ambition to go back and keep on walking it. It's just a wonderful route, and we love Italy. That part of Italy is just beautiful, full of history. I tell people you can't walk 2 feet without stepping on some part of ancient Roman history or older than Roman history in Italy. And it is also drop dead gorgeous. And we found the Italian people warm, friendly, but a lot of them don't speak English, but that's okay. You learn a little bit of Italian, and you bring along a wife who's nearly fluent in Spanish, and somehow you figure out your way. They would say something to my wife, and she kind of look at her like this, and then she'd go, oh, she knew what they were saying, because Italian has a lot of similarities to Spanish. I know more French. There's stuff that's also similar between French and Italian. So somehow or other, we figure it out, except for the few Italians who would keep talking to us, even when we told them that we didn't understand them. Someone asked about my book. You can get on Amazon. You can also buy it on my website. I sell it there. It's sold in both places. The Walk of a Lifetime.
Question, Russ.
Yes.
If you aren't totally in shape, how long would you walk, and how much distance to kind of prep yourself for this at age 72?
At the young age of 72, I would say you could easily start by, you know what, this is a very common question, Carolyn. People ask me this a lot. And I say, go out if you're not used to walking and walk a mile, then walk 2 miles. And every day keep on adding a mile. And if it feels a bit of a stretch, then stop and rest a day until you can walk anywhere from 5 to 10 miles. And actually your body will adapt. And let me just say, I'm a cyclist. I ride a lot, but I don't, and I like to walk, but I'm not used to walking 5 or 10 miles a day. So even I have to get used to it. My hips and my knees feel it the first couple of days when I'm doing long distance walking. So even my wife and I'm not quite 72, we trained for our walk by going out and first walking like 5 miles and 7 miles and then 10 miles. And then we put our packs on with maybe not the full weight, 5 miles, then 7 miles, then 10 miles. So it can be done, but you have to first start easy by walking a few miles. Make sure you have really good footwear. And if there's an outfitter shop anywhere near you, or if you're in a big city and there happens to be something like REI, I'm an REI member, so I will give a plug for them, even though they're not going to give me anything for us. You can get fitted well for a shoe. I discovered a number of years ago that my feet are flat, like 30 years ago. And I usually go somewhere to find footwear where I tell them my feet are flat. What do you recommend? And that's when I learned about Chacos nearly 10 years ago.
Okay, there's an REI about a half an hour from where I live, so that might be a good place to go shopping.
Yes, and you are lucky. And the nearest REI to me is 2 hours. So whenever I go to Richmond or up to DC, I'm always stopping at the REI. Yes, it's a fabulous shop, and people there will help you. There's several good brands of walking shoes. A lot of these things, Carolyn, you don't need boots. In fact, I would recommend to people to not get a pair of ankle-high boots. It's overkill. If anything, you're just adding extra weight to your feet, which adds extra stress to your knees and your ankles.
I still have my boots from 76 when I climbed Kilimanjaro, but I won't take them.
No, you don't need them. The only day I didn't wear sandals actually was the day that we climbed up over to the Monteluco and into Spoleto, because it was so rocky going up over the mountain pass. I was a little bit uncertain, and I took my shoes along. I actually changed from sandals into shoes when we got into the mountains. I probably could have done it okay with the sandals, but sometimes you get little stones underneath your foot.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
I'll put my website in there. There you go, russines.com. And you can find out more about the book.
Don't forget the map, would you, Russ? I just need to take a picture.
Sure. I'll give you the map. Sometimes when I've done this, I have also brought up a Google Maps to show it. So let me go back up through here and let's find the map. Yeah, that map is in this book by Sandy Brown about the Way of St. Francis. That map's way back there at the beginning, isn't it? There you go. That's the map right there. And that's actually the same map that's in his book. If you get his book, it's a very good book. And the interesting thing, there are other guidebooks to it, but Sandy's has this one particular route that kind of combines the best of all the routes. And I think that's the best way to go, is to get Sandy's book, especially if you're in the States. And Sandy also has led guided tours or groups on pilgrimage along this route. And if you are a pilgrim and you go the whole route into Rome, I think if you walk at least the last 100 kilometers into Rome, there is a hostel well, actually, there's a monastery that is run by some nuns that will give you free lodging, but you have to show that you'll walk the last 100 kilometers. I asked, since my wife and I had walked 100 kilometers to Assisi, could we stay there? And they said no. We had to arrive in Rome by foot, coming at least 100 kilometers next time. Let's see, are there any more questions in the chat or any more time? Anyone else have a question? You can raise your hand or just blurt out your question. We have a couple more minutes.
Questions in chat section.
Okay, let's check. I think we got all the questions in there. Total cost of the trip and the towns. Yeah, I don't know anything more about the names of the towns.
What about some of the places that you stayed, just off the top of your head?
By the way,
put it in the notes.
I will in the notes actually that I have prepared for you that'll come. There is a link to a lodging list that Sandy has prepared.
Perfect.
Keep in mind it's dated.
Yeah.
However, Sandy will update that. Right now, he doesn't know what's open or going to be open.
Of course,
but,
yes.
But that lodging list is kept updated periodically. So I'll send you the link to that.
Perfect.
We really enjoyed all the places we stayed. We enjoyed the Italian food. Was just a delightful walk. Like I said, I'm ready to go back. Well, you were a great group. I really enjoyed having you all this afternoon and sharing about this pilgrimage. I probably sometime in June or July, I'll do another talk about the Camino de Santiago, walking the Camino Frances. So keep an eye out for that. We're talking about maybe doing some special things about Spain with food and travel and photography in the month of July. So we'll look out for it then. Everybody have a great afternoon. I hope to see some of you in some classes tomorrow. Yes, I have my top 10 travel tips and foods of Oaxaca. So one place you can travel right now is Mexico. So
and did you go to the Guelaguetza while you were there?
I did not.
Oh, no, I spent a month there and I took language in Cuernavaca and then went to Oaxaca for the Guelaguetza.
I have not been
cool.
to Mexico since 2013, and I'm going back this year later. So I'm looking forward to it.
Good.
I mean,
Thank
Mexico's
you.
open, but isn't, what's their COVID rate? Although if you're vaccinated, I guess you're okay.
Well, that's the other side of the
Who
risk.
knows?
Yes. There's two sides of travel right now. One is whether you can get into a country, and the other question is, do you want to go? Well, thanks for everybody for being here. Hope to see you in some other travel classes, and have a good afternoon and evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Mille grazie.
Thanks, Russ.
Russ, I put it in a note to you, but in the future, if you maybe want to I'd happy to co-host maybe Packing for Women trip with you.
I'd love that. I'd love that because we're going to have you help with another class, Melinda. So we'll be in touch about that one. I always am looking for classes where I can get women to help me prepare some of this, because as a man, I do some things differently, and I'm aware of that. So thanks a lot, Melinda.
It's also be packing for people that aren't hikers. That's more urban.
Very good. Very good.
People
Pull your thoughts together, Melinda.
Okay.
Pull your thoughts together. That's great. Thank you. Good night.